Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, we continue our series, Masters of Film Noir. We'll be looking at the jagged little gem, Strange Illusion, directed by Edgar G. Ulmer. This is a little B-movie in which German Expressionism meets film noir to tell a version of Hamlet. It's intriguing and inventive in any number of ways. Joining us after the screening will be Matthew Sorrento. Matthew is the editor-in-chief of Film International, as well as a noted expert on noir. Now, enter the special dreamscape of Strange Illusion. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed Strange Illusion, directed by Edgar G. Ulmer. When's the last time you saw a film that began and ended with a dream sequence? This is really quite a remarkable small film from the so-called Poverty Row, but it is a key film of noir in a number of ways. And to chat about that, it's a pleasure to welcome to City Cinematheque Matthew Sorrento. Matthew is the editor-in-chief of Film International, a well-known scholar of noir, published on it, as well as someone who teaches film studies at the Rutgers Camden campus. Welcome, Matt, to City Cinematheque.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. It's great to be here.
Great, great. So let's start off, in a certain sense, with film noir, Poverty Row, those studios, and the big studios. So, for example, when this film comes out, Double Indemnity has already been a big hit. What's going on?
That's right. 1944, Double Indemnity comes out, directed by Billy Wilder. And this is a film noir that really establishes the popularity of the style. He did have some private investigator-centered film noirs before that. But this criminal-centered film noir, starring Fred MacMurray, popularizes this bleak worldview of a main character, a loner basically, who falls into crime, tempted by the femme fatale figure, played by Barbara Stanwyck in this film. And I think at that point, a lot of film studios, and especially Poverty Row studios, wanted to kind of cash in and jump on this type of style. And with Strange Illusion, we get kind of a tweaking, what David Bordwell would call the switcheroo, basically, of Double Indemnity. And now you don't have a woman working with a lover to off her husband, as you did in Double Indemnity. Now this new lover is working alone and off the husband and finding his way into a family unit, basically, trying to take over the wealth and everything. So.
Well, and one of the interesting things is when we say film noir, we're saying film noir in the third decade of the 21st century.
Right.
When they're making these films, they're just making a new kind of crime film, right?
That's right, yeah. You look at, think about some actors, they would call them just B pictures, these crime films. There was no term for them yet. It wasn't until the 1950s, you had Nino Frank, the French film critic, read about these dark black films, which in French was the film noir. And then the French basically got more interest in them and brought that interest over to America. I should say critical interest beyond, viewership interest.
Well, I think that thanks for bringing up that point, because that's also brings up this point of distribution, because the French during World War II, when they were occupied, were not getting American movies.
That's right.
And so after the war, there was this kind of flood of films, of American films, and they were very, very popular, etc. And then it was the critics that you're talking about who noticed that there was a different kind of crime film from the kind of gangster films that they'd seen in the 20s and the 30s. And that's when these people get interested in following your, following what you're saying and saying, well, there's this thing, they're the dark films, the film noir.
Film noir, right, yeah, there was a flood, a first wave that came into France. I believe it was Laura, Double Indemnity, Maltese Falcon, and maybe Murder My Sweet. They were all released at the same time. And you see some criminal-centered noirs and some unofficial investigator noirs as well. One thing fascinating about the film noir style is that the police really aren't trusted. They have a presence in Strange Illusion, but they really, the crime is figured out by unofficial investigators, either private eyes or just laymen. In this case, the main character with help from his mentor, Dr. Vincent.
Right, and one of the interesting things about this, when you take a non-professional investigator even if when they're sympathetic, is like, one, how much are they going to put themselves in danger, but also how good are they going to be at this? I mean, they're amateurs, and there's an ambiguous status to them that a policeman or a detective doesn't, by their nature, have. That's
true, right? Yeah, a lot of crime film scholars write about how American viewers hate passive victims. Okay. So if you have a victim-centered noir like Strange Illusion, he has to right the wrong in some way. If you go back a little earlier, a lot of the victim films were social problem films, like I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang and Fury with Spencer Tracy. But it wasn't until World War II came along, we had this fear of fascism and a bleak worldview, that you get victim-centered noirs like Strange Illusion, but still they have to right the wrongs against them, these main characters.
No, that's, and this is a film that in terms of its plot structure, he's a victim, at least these first, say, third of the film or so, that sense. And then there's his own question about his own stability and his relationship, and his relationship with the world. And then the kind of the break point comes when we break point of view and we find out that yes, that fellow he suspected, could he be Barrington? He is Barrington.
Right, yeah, sort of the Hitchcock approach of revealing the culprit and then making a suspense story out of it instead of relying on the mystery. Kind of what you see years later in Vertigo, where you know what the mystery is, in a way, yeah.
Well, no, I think you just brought up an excellent point of the way in which this is a film that pretty conspicuously mixes mystery and this kind of thriller investigation as well.
Right, absolutely, and you can see the main character, Jimmy Lydon's role, gets more and more confident. I believe they casted him because he had kind of the swagger that some of the stars, the young stars at the time, like Mickey Rooney had.
Right.
Like a likable swagger. And we'll get to this later maybe in our discussion, but I think it hurts the film that sometimes he's a little too confident. If he's playing what would be a Hamlet type of figure who should be kind of more benighted,
Well, no. Hamlet has those problems from beginning to end, and he seems to get rid of a bit of it as he gets this confidence, and then even later in the film when he says, no, I need to go back there because we need to retain the cover. And I think most people in the audience are kind of saying, you're overreaching there. If I were in your story world, I would probably not go back.
Right.
But that's his confidence about the fact that he's going to control the situation.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, as you're pointing out. Right. Let's talk a little bit about him and who he was in Hollywood, James Lydon, Jimmy Lydon, at this particular moment, because there's a particular kind of game that the Poverty Row studios play when they get name actors.
Right, yeah, he was in a series of low-budget films. The name escapes me, the series.
Henry Aldrich.
Henry Aldrich, right, yeah. Sort of like the type of series that you would see Mickey Rooney in, likable, but low budget. And,
right.
I guess you'd call it stunt casting in a way, putting Jimmy Lydon in this role, a likable type of figure and of a darker type of crime story.
Yeah, because in the other stuff, he's just this carefree, cocky young man, and it's really comedy. And then all of a sudden, you get in this film, and because it's a film interested in psychology, you get the kind of neurotic version of that. Right. All of his friends are so normal, but he's the one who's, is he troubled or is he visionary? Or it brings up those questions.
Right. I love the scene where they're playing jazz near the beginning. It introduces kind of like a bleak element that the youth are being jeopardized by jazz, which, rock and roll music would be that same element down the line in the 50s.
Right, and just skip ahead a couple of decades, and the evil of hip hop would enter the world. All of those youth musics that are the marker of how that generation will be the end of civilization because they've been listening to this music that will,
Right, yeah. One of those casting discussions you love to hear about between Leon Fromkis and Ulmer, like why they chose to have Jimmy Lydon in there for his likability, his confidence. From what I hear about him as an actor, he was just one of these really confident, comfortable actors, and he got on Broadway right away as a young actor, probably why. And he has that sense of kind of swagger that, Mickey Rooney had in a lot of roles,
And had a very long, just to point out, had a very long career that continued all the way through television, and we can remark that he passed in 2022.
Right, 2020, and still doing interviews up to 2014, 2015. Completely lucid, wonderful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And we should appreciate a character like that. This is getting a little bit away from film noir, but this kind of professional utility actor, the person with the long-term career, and then when children saw him on television in 1967, they had no idea he'd been this actor, 25 years before, or when they saw him, even 25 years later, you didn't know. But there's that through line of a particular kind of professional actor.
Right, and if you think about it in a way, Fred McMurray, going back to Double Indemnity,
Please.
was going against type in a way. He was known for comedies at the time, and maybe a couple of westerns, and eventually went back to comedies. Billy Wilder saw the potential in Double Indemnity to take a comedic actor and put him in a bleak, really darker role. Maybe they were trying to go for the same thing in Strange Illusion with.
Well, I think you're absolutely on the mark there, and I just want to give Fred McMurray one more credit that you've already given him, and for me, as someone who grew up watching him in Flubber, a Disney movie,
right, yeah.
or that, and was unaware of this, and when you see him in Double Indemnity, and then years later in the Academy Award winning The Apartment,
right,
where he, where he is this absolutely amoral, slimy, misogynist, ultimately manipulative executive, you say, wait a minute, isn't this the guy who's on Father Knows, not Father Knows Best, My Three Sons?
My Three Sons, right? Yeah.
So there is this game, even that the Poverty Row is playing with, when they're contracting actors, they're using more than just their skills. They're using the image that comes with them to create a more complex character or image.
Definitely, yeah. And the short shooting schedules really lend itself to more of an immediate performance and a kind of rough type of style. Some call it, shaggy or awkward, but I think it's more in your face and effective.
Okay,
personally.
no, I think that. So let's stick with style for a while, Matt. Yeah, let's stick with style. So what about the opening of this film? What do you make of it, and what do you think of it?
I'll be honest with you. The first time I saw this film 20-some years ago, that's what stuck in my mind, the opening and closing. And it was one of those situations where I thought back and I thought there was more of it in the film. Those very strong memories of viewing you have where you think, okay,
Correct.
This stands out, this moment. If you watch something like Blue Velvet, there's certain scenes that stick out in Blue Velvet.
Right, absolutely.
And here was those moments, I could have sworn there was more, but I went back and said, no, okay, there's not really any more dream sequences. It just kind of bookends it. And the opening's a great line of interest, but I can see why some viewers will be disappointed with not seeing any of that brought back into the plot. No other dream sequences or any other type of pop surrealism.
Right. Though one of the interesting things about the plotting is, of course, that sequence in its low budget but quite visually compelling manner introduces all of these motifs that then keep popping up through the film, like the bracelet, for example. And I think that's one of the things that's not only unsettling to him, but it's also unsettling to us. Yeah, go on.
That's true, right? Yeah, I think Edgar G, the director here, was comfortable bringing in different influences. And he could kind of pull a golf club out of his bag and use it when he needed to.
I like that image.
Yeah, I use the bracelet, and that's another element from his dream, right? He sees it come to life. It's fascinating when you think about the nature of dreams and how they're supposed to warn us away from danger in our lives. Right. Like when we sense danger, we have a dream. That's how we can kind of take on this sense of danger. And this film kind of plays on that nature. Like, how can you use your dreams to fight off a possible dangerous situation coming up?
Yeah.
Some of those elements do that, yeah.
And Ulmer, excuse me, as you well know, I mean, he comes out of a film world in Austria and Germany as a young man, in which all of these internal states, whether it be heightened states of consciousness or dream states, etc., are essential to this broad thing called, expressionism.
Right, and it's disputed if he worked on a couple major films like Metropolis and M. He maybe did, we're not sure, but he definitely co-directed People on Sunday with Billy Wilder, who later on made Double Indemnity, speaking of. Yeah, and we have The Black Cat too, the wonderful horror film. in the 30s. That, again, tough to kind of judge that film. A lot of it was cut out. There were scenes removed, and so we don't know. It has kind of like a dreamlike feeling to it, but that film has a great tone, a great sense of surrealism. And you know, I think Ulmer was confident to use it where he wanted to in Strange Illusion after doing a film like The Black Cat.
Right, right. Yeah. That also, you know, that brings up this whole question of mental states, of madness versus sanity. And so this is a film. Not only is it a film that has two remarkable dream sequences that actually bookend the film, which we don't know, but it's actually got two kinds of battling psychologists in it.
Right, yeah, two mentors, right? The
Yeah.
mentor and dark mentor. Yeah, right. It's almost like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Vader from years prior in a way, you know. Yeah, right. I know that's I mean, you can think about like the nature of the hero's journey. I mean, at this time,
please.
I think it was just kind of, there was no book written about it yet. No one clarified the hero's journey, but they probably had a good idea in the studios how they could use a mentor figure to fuel a story, and even the mentor to Warren Williams' character, the mentor to Barrington.
Right, absolutely.
Another mentor there. A very, archetypal type of story elements that I think it's great to see him work through different genres. You know, yeah.
No, absolutely the case. What about this whole play on Hamlet? What about that in the film? I mean,
when I watch Strange Illusion, I'm thinking, okay, they're just trying to retool double indemnity, and do the switcheroo, which, hey, I don't put it down for that. I think the great thing about genre cinema is that you can find these nuances and little changes that say a whole lot more about what's going on there. So I think the idea of adapting Hamlet was probably fuel for the scenario writer, and just kind of, okay, let's do this. But as they're working on it, they shaped it into a noir retooling. You know,
Yeah. What I find interesting about that is that I find that the film is actually a bit ambivalent about, you know, I mean, and certainly there are changes made. I mean, there are characters in Hamlet that don't show up in any kind of avatar here, but there's a way in which, you know, we've got that castle in Denmark and all of that, and then we have this mansion. The father is the former lieutenant, you know, governor. And so the degree to which there's this, you know, potentially parallel setup between the new kingdom of California and the old, and I find that interesting. But then the film really says, well, maybe I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in psychoanalysis.
Right, yeah, there's a sense of the old guard being taken over by someone else. And there's an early scene early on in the film where mother and son, Jimmy Lydon's character and the mother are very close. It's almost, you know, Oedipal in a way. They probably planted that, thinking that.
Well, and she is referred to as the princess by her children.
Right, yeah. And even Jimmy Lydon's character is, I mean, I'd say pre-sexual. I mean, he never reads that way, kind of innocent and boyish, you know. And I think that helps us understand how he thinks of women and how he's going about things in the story.
Yeah, and this whole notion that there is something hidden there that you know, it turns out it has to do with the father's death, but it's almost, I like your point about his maturation. That is, to really become a man, there are things that are hidden, and it sets it up in the film that eventually he must solve his father's death to fully assume the role of that he's been designated by the father as taking over those responsibilities, but he has this burden of solving the crime.
Right, he has that burden. There's even the sexual imagery with the train at the beginning, which Hitchcock played on later on. The train, of course, is the way that the father dies, that, you know, that's set up by Barrington to kill off the father. But the train has a nice erotic kind of charge to it, and it could be this emerging sexuality for Paul, Jimmy Lydon's character, and how he feels that coming and has to right the wrongs in his life.
I think it's very much the case. And as you pointed out a little bit earlier, you know, early in the film, I must say, after the dream sequence, when you meet him in waking life, he seems much more interesting in the dream sequence than he does in waking life. He just seems to be this, you know, a little bit troubled kid who's not that dynamic. But he really, once the investigation kicks in, not only do the plot mechanism make it more interesting, there are suspense setups that we had not had before, but you know, as the proactive investigator. He's much more he's much more lively and much more compelling. We see him on that path to maturation.
Right, yeah, he seems very confident, I think, through the entire film. Definitely
Right.
once he knows, he's pretty sure what's going on and he has the right target in sights. But he seems very confident early on. And, you have that very early scene after his opening dream sequence where they're dressed in the hunting outfit. And
Yeah.
it's just like, I mean, they're wearing the same clothes, him and Dr. Vincent, like they're joined together, like, almost like he's a paternal figure,
Right.
in like this new version.
Let's contrast him a little bit with the character played by Warren William, who was a contract player for many, many years and an extremely successful one with Warner Brothers.
Right,
And
yeah.
he is everything but innocent in this film.
Right, yeah, the pencil thin mustache, and he plays that dapper villain. I always think about Vincent Price's character in Laura. He kind of really embodied that upper class, kind of entitled villain here, and a little bit of like a social commentary. These people with too much money have too much free time, and they're just going to, exploit it in some way. I think it was a little bit of stunt casting. I know Warren Williams was a star, but I think he was almost in place for Vincent Price at that point.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I also put him in contrast, and this brings up some of the production code issues that were still very much in place, and that many noir films challenged. Many noir films were at the limit, or for some people went over the limit. Some noir films were banned or had problems. But here, if Paul seems to be, desexualized in so many ways, I mean, he seems to be boy rather than man, and that boy to man is part of his journey. The Brett character, he seems to be overly sexualized, in the film.
Right, yeah, I think he's drawn that way to be clearly villainous. Yes, he wants to marry the mother, Jimmy Lydon's character's mother, but he has darker goals beyond that. And a lot of these noir films were about, violating family values.
Oh, good, excellent
yeah,
point.
they're in a way. A lot of people argue that they are kind of conservative. They're endorsing family values, and basically, Paul, Jimmy Lydon's character in this film, is trying to reestablish the family as it should be, like him guarding his mother, making sure any man who approaches her is legitimate, and really kind of holding on to whatever traditional family values he can, hold on to the traditional family unit as best as possible.
You're absolutely correct. And as charged from beyond the grave by his father, by the letter that's been timed to be sent out, that sets the agenda for him. I mean, it just says, look, your mother and your sister need to be protected. I know about that. Now it's your job.
Yeah, and that's in place of Hamlet's ghost talking to Hamlet, like, mark me, leave her to heaven, all those great lines. Basically we wonder in Hamlet, is that just young Hamlet's fear emerging in his mind? Is that his own unconscious mind speaking, or is it really the ghost? And that letter almost kind of takes the same type of place, It's his own fears. It represents his own fears more than what the father would want,
Right. And the character, the threat, not only to the mother, I mean, and will he simply take her money? Will he kill her? But this is pushing the line, because he's not only the villain in seducing the mother and rushing her into the marriage, and rushing her into a physical relationship. It's very clear. No, we'll go up to the lake for a couple of days beforehand. But also the way in which we get the backstory, even from his own psychiatrist, about the fact, watch out for that tendency of yours with young women. And so we see him, as a film would never say it. He would never use the word rapist or serial, but he's clearly a person who cannot control his erotic impulses.
Right. Yeah. You wonder how much censorship and self-imposed censorship comes in to play with that type of character being drawn out, because he's clearly denoted as being an absolute villain, must be punished by the end. Okay. And we know that with the production code, anyone who commits a crime like that has to be punished
Absolutely
by the
correct.
end. And that, of course, leads us to this ambiguous ending in Strange Illusion, which is pretty fascinating. A lot of
Well, yeah, let's do that. I mean, so
Yeah.
we get rid of him. I mean, he has the knife by him, and he's been caught in the act, and the police just shoot him dead on sight. So he's gone, but then Paul is knocked over, and talk to us about that, buddy.
Right, yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, sure. Barrington knocks out Paul before Barrington's shot down by the police, or taken out by them. And the final, the closing of the film is inside Paul's mind, basically. He's walking with his mother, and then Dr. Vincent walks his mother away and says, "Don't look back." So we're wondering, is Dr. Vincent going to be the new father figure? Is this who Paul wants to be the father figure? And then we have that fascinating closing where Paul walks away with the unclear presence of a woman. We don't know who it is. It's like a shape of a woman.
Right.
We're meant to think it's his girlfriend in the
Lydia,
film. Lydia, but we don't know. And interesting, because that kind of brings me back again to Double Indemnity, the opening scene of Double Indemnity, where you have the man walking with crutches. And the idea in that film, if you haven't seen it, but the idea is that this image, the opening credits shadow image of this man, represents all the men that Phyllis, the femme fatale in that film, have taken down, and how all men are potential victims,
right,
in a way. So we have this shape of the a girlfriend, possible wife at the end of Strange Illusion, but we don't know who it is. He's still unsure about it.
No, and unsure. I mean, there's the things we're sure about at the end of this film, and then it's a very unusual film because there's things we're unsure about.
Absolutely.
We're unsure about his exact future. We're unsure about the fact that he's been knocked out. It doesn't seem to be exactly a death reverie. But is it? I mean,
right,
all of those things, and so that walk away from the kind of redundant absolute closure preferred by certain Hollywood films is one of the characteristics of noir.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in production code, or we can say even the classical Hollywood style of cinema, wanted every character's fate to be clear, at least suggested in some way. And you're right, his fate is not clear at the end. Yeah, you can think about it. Is it a death dream facing the end, ending of life? We know that the film wanted to bookend the narrative with two dream sequences, so maybe Ulmer and Fromkis imposed that at the end there and said, okay, let's knock him out instead of having him sleep at night somewhere.
You know what I've got to do? I've got to impose our ending.
Wow.
Because we've come to the end of our discussion for today.
Excellent.
If you've enjoyed this discussion, please tune in other weeks for our other discussions of films. What are those films going to be? Who are the guests going to be? There's a way to find out, and that's by visiting our website. Please visit www.tv.cuny.edu. There you're going to find information about City Cinematheque, and in addition, you'll see the full offering of screenings and other shows on City University Television, CUNY TV. So please visit www.tv.cuny.edu. Okay. Matt, thank you for bringing your expertise on film noir to us today. It's a pleasure chatting with you and learning a lot more about the film by doing so.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. It was a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us here today, and please join us in the future as we continue our strolls through the archives of film history. For now, it's goodbye.